You are listening to Swamp Things, a podcast about University of Florida sports with the Orlando Sentinel's Edgar Thompson and the AP's Mark Long. Edgar and Mark discuss the goings-on with the Gators in Gainesville, where each is a longtime resident who has seen championship success, coaching turmoil, and plenty of drama on and off the field.
Greetings and welcome to Swamp Things, a podcast about the Florida Gators. It's December 9th, 2025. I'm Edgar Thompson of the Orlando Sentinel, joined by Mark Long of the Associated Press. That snuck up on me, Mark. Where's Wesley? This thing just started out of nowhere, but we're ready. We're ready.
We are.
Tell you who wasn't ready much of the time was Billy Napier. And one of the big knocks on him, among many, was his inability to act decisively and quickly. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, his game management, it's all about making quick decisions, and that was probably his biggest issue, was game management.
In transfer portal, a lot of people felt he might have been a little slow there to identify a guy and secure a guy, right? He wanted to see more film and more testing from recruits and things like this. Jon Sumrall has been anything but slow on the draw, right? I mean, this guy is hit the ground running while also managing another job at Tulane. And it's been pretty impressive. Within a couple of days of hiring Kentucky's Brad White as the defensive coordinator, we talked about him last week, I believe. It all gets muddled. He's hiring Georgia Tech's Buster Faulkner, who's coming to Gainesville maybe a year too late. Billy Napier, by all accounts, was maybe encouraged to maybe take a look at Buster Faulkner as a potential play caller in 2025, and decided now he was good after a 4-game winning streak, and it proved his demise. Then on Monday, Jon Sumrall retains defensive line coach Gerald Chapman, who I've been stumping for like a month, right? I mean, we've been talking about this guy. I'm like, keep him. Just because I really like the way the young defensive tackles emerged. I mean, you were really kind of Johnny on the spot there. You were already talking about McLeod before he, and Mbachu during the spring. I mean, he was working Jake Slaughter over during spring game. And, neither of those guys were hugely impactful, but they were good rotational players. And then you look at Mekhi Burrow's development, which was significant. And then look at how Kem Jackson went from a 370-some pound guy to 330-something, and pretty good player in 2024, and then was a 5th-round pick and a Senior Bowl participant. And then Caleb Banks, who was really not very productive, and then suddenly, last November particularly, was a dominant force. Played only 3 games because of injury, but as you noted, I mean, he was just pushing guys into the backfield those 3 games, consistently dominating. So keeping Gerald Chapman was a good move, I thought. And they also had a relationship briefly at Tulane before Gerald Chapman came to Gainesville in December of 2023. They were together with the Green Wave for a couple of weeks after Sumrall replaced Willie Fritz. So it's hard not to like the moves, I guess. But I just love the alacrity, right? I mean, this guy is doing this. And, White was a thorn in the Gators' side. I mean, Kentucky won 4 out of 5 games against Florida. We were really physical against them, and then beat the tar out of them 38-7 on November 8th. And I think those 4 games won by an average of 17 points margin. And then Faulkner really turned around the Yellow Jackets' attack. Did they win 1 game before he and Brent Key got there and averaged 17 points? It was really poor. And then, improved that by almost at least 10 or 11 points his first year, and turned Texas A&M cast-off Haynes King into a really top quarterback. So I kind of laid it out for you. I know you have on. Well, no, I know you have thoughts on all the guys, but just, you know me, I like to dig into the statistics a little.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of thoughts. I think it's fantastic that you're keeping some guys, but I think bigger than anything is the fact that Jon Sumrall is going outside of Tulane to make his hires. That is not what happened with Billy Napier. He put together a less than ideal staff. Everybody ripped it from the beginning. They ripped it over the years. They ripped his additions. He did not have a good feel for what he needed to run a successful offense. He didn't have a good feel for what he needed to run a successful defense. Ron Roberts, by all accounts, very solid defensive coordinator, but he also got taken to the woodshed at Kentucky in that game defensively. I mean, they just toyed all day with him, especially in the first half. So this is a much better hire. Austin Armstrong, certainly Billy's strength coaches were a joke. He just did not have a lot of beef on his offensive line. And it's one of the reasons Billy stuck around. I do believe there's a possibility that Billy would have got fired in 2024 had there been someone on staff, Scott Strickland and company, wanted to see in that role. So now, again, you've already got guys. Buster Faulkner is very highly regarded around college football. Same for Brad White. The more I talk to people, the more these guys are loved. They think this is their home run hires. These are home run hires for the Gators. And I think it gives you guys that, hey, if it doesn't work out for Sumrall, and nobody's thinking like this, but if it doesn't work out for Sumrall in year 3 or year 4, some calamity happens, you got guys on the staff you could turn to and maybe feel good about, taking this team to the next level or whatever. So I do think they're very good hires, very thoughtful hires. The keeping, I wanted to see Billy Gonzalez. I like Billy Gonzalez. I've dealt with him a lot. I want to see Billy Gonzalez stick around. I think the receivers are good, and you need to keep those guys in-house, and I thought that was the best chance. But, I also get that Jon Sumrall is looking for more, and this staff, even with the talent it's had, hasn't done enough, hasn't been good enough. And, so would you be surprised if it's only Chapman? I don't know that I would, to be honest.
Well, glad you didn't have any thoughts. So never preface that I don't have many thoughts, because you always do. You'll break it down to the nub. And wow, I thought that was really well said. And you foreshadowed the Billy Gonzalez news from yesterday that I was going to bring up here. But let's get back to Ron Roberts for a second. Look, 28-0 against Tennessee. I mean, that was a complete collapse. So I thought he did pretty well. I don't think he was elite here by any stretch. So
he's got talent, right? There's clearly talent on that defensive side of the ball.
And injuries, back to your point about, the strength program. Now, I'm not one to always just point the finger at the strength coach when there are injuries, but you hear behind the scenes Tyler Miles, young, exuberant, and also maybe lacking credibility. I mean, he never had this position when he stepped in for Craig Fitzgerald when he bolted to Boston College after 6 weeks to join Bill O'Brien. I bet he wished he'd stayed in Gainesville, but I mean, that's a disaster up there. But yeah, and I heard he was pretty much of a hard ass. Now, he got results. Remember going into 2024, what they add, 575 pounds of muscle and lost 475 pounds of fat or whatever it was. No, I wrote it. But it was all these measurables that looked impressive. But
it was the biggest loser 2.0.
But didn't translate to the field is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And then you heard that he pushed these guys in season hard. And when Billy Gonzalez got there, they shortened practices by 30 minutes. And that's a Billy Napier thing too. But there was less maybe push that you just overuse, even at that age. If you're 20 years old and just a world-class athlete, man, your body can only handle so much load. And you see all the injuries. I think if you looked at the injury report at the end of the season, Florida's was longer than anyone's. So there needed to be massive sweeping changes. Billy Gonzalez is no longer going to be here, sadly. Thought he handled himself incredibly well during the interim, tough interim period. Robert Bala, the linebacker coach, sounds like he's gone, but that's not surprising because Brad White's a linebacker guy. And we mentioned Tyler Miles. And as you said, I can't imagine they're going to keep many more. Any candidates that you're thinking any people in the building even, you think they might keep around?
Yeah, I would certainly consider keeping Mike Peterson and moving him back to his natural position, which is an inside linebacker. Brad White's worked with outside linebackers. So I would consider Brad White's got that covered, right? That's kind of been his forte. Pass rush guys, edge guys, Josh Allen. So you let him handle that. And I think it would be a nice transition for Mike Pete to get back to middle linebacker, those inside backers, what he knows, where he played, long career in the NFL, a great career at Florida. But I think it's beneficial to have a couple of guys in your staff who have played there, been there, know that, been there, done that, know everything about the program. Brandon Spikes is another one. I would consider keeping those guys because you're not going to be able to replicate the knowledge that they bring in terms of history, rivalry, hatred for your rivals. Some of that stuff, that's some good stuff, right? These kids, 18 to 22 years old, very impressionable. I think you can help them a little bit, get in their heads a little bit, understand, hey, this is what it means, and here's why. And it's a tougher thing for Jon Sumrall to sell, in my opinion, than a guy who played here and a guy who's been here certainly like Mike Pete has.
You love you some Mike Pete. I don't think the edge group was very good under him, and I think he's a nice guy. I don't know. I mean, he does have the
Jaden Woods flashed late. Gums had some moments here and there.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that plays out. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to Mike Pete moving to the inside linebacker coaching position, given, he's a Gator legend and knows this program and loves this program. You had mentioned Joe Houston at one point. I don't know about that. Special teams. And another guy to consider, I think, Jabbar Jalouk, the running backs coach. That's been a strong position for years. You're trying to, under Billy, it was as strong as any, is the most consistent probably. Good recruiting. Jaden Baugh you want to keep. If he has an affinity and relationship to Jabbar Jalouk, you maybe keep him. Russ Callaway, we've talked about there was a relationship there, right, with Faulkner, with Buster Faulkner.
I think with Faulkner, yeah. They cross paths at someplace. Yeah.
So I don't know if he might, move into a well-paid analyst role again or something. I don't know how that'll play out. It'll be interesting to watch. One of our colleagues believes that the strength coach is the biggest hire. I'm not sure I buy that as much anymore, but they definitely need to get this strength program up and running again. Letting Nick Savage go, I think, was a bad move. He went to Ole Miss, and you saw what they did with him.
Yeah, it is still an important hire. It's not as important. It used to be the hire, and it used to be that way because you didn't have a lot of contact with these kids. You couldn't have a lot of contact with them. You could meet with them here and there. Certainly had spring football, but you just didn't have the time that you have now. Now, especially with them being basically in-house with you in terms of having the facility there, you can meet with them all the time. And you've got, not only do you have spring, but you got the OTAs where you're on the field with these guys, coaches, working with them. So it's much more than it used to be. It used to be they would literally, after spring practice until report day in late July would be, or even early August, it would be the strength coach was the only guy who had contact. Couldn't have any contact with them. So that's not the case anymore. You have a lot more contact from a position coach, from a head coach standpoint. So those are more important hires in my estimation. But I agree with you. When you look at this roster, you look at the injuries, they've got issues. That's a big hire.
Yeah, Buster Faulkner, if there's one thing Mark loves more than some Mike Pete, it's boom. And in 2000, was his freshman year at Valdosta State. And you know who was on that staff? Will Muschamp and Kirby Smart. And then Kirby stayed for another year. So Buster Faulkner, who then coached later under Kirby and was Stetson Bennett's quarterback's coach, you talk about a guy who evolved, former walk-on who became like a superstar, you know, without having the prototypical measurables you would want from a quarterback, but he had something. He knew how to win. He was a great athlete, really elusive and things like that. So, yeah, that's interesting. So you might hit your boy Boom up. I'm sure you already have.
He was one of the first people to text me when the hires happened and said, fantastic hires, home run hires. You're going to love these guys, both really good coaches. And he knows them both pretty well.
I hope we get some access to these guys. I hope we get coordinators like we used to under Dan Mullen and previous regimes, because it's that one voice thing, man, is this, and especially when it's one voice who doesn't say much, right? Yes. Sumrall's been in Gainesville a couple of days, soon headed back to Tulane to prepare his team for a December 20 visit to Ole Miss during the opening round of the college football playoff. You got to love how the committee sets these things up, right? You got the new Florida coach going against the program that the coach everyone wanted was the coach at, Lane Kiffin, but is no longer because he's at LSU, leaving the Rebels in the lurch. But any thoughts from that the Green Waves 34-21 AAC championship game win against North Texas? I mean, they held the top scoring offense in the nation to 3 touchdowns, and really, you know, it was convincing. It wasn't even as close as the score. They set up scores of a forced fumble and a nice return. They recovered another fumble and a punt, +5 turnover margin, held the ball for 35 minutes, rushed for almost 200 yards. I mean, it's pretty dominant performance.
Yeah, I think my 2 takeaways, number one was I loved his energy and his enthusiasm on the sideline. You watched him. I mean, he was losing his mind on a couple of, you know, calls here and there, but exciting, right? Excitement, crazed a little bit on the sideline with his players celebrating. We haven't seen that. Boom was really the last guy to really, really celebrate. McElwain was much more of a rip you when you screw something up, and that Boom did a little bit of that too. Mullen and Napier, both of them pretty solemn guys on the sideline, you know, during the game, during celebrations, whatever. Sumrall's not like that. Sumrall is way more enthusiastic, in your face, celebrating, you know, chest pounding, high-fiving, jumping with his guys. That's what I love. And more than that, I love the fact that if you just look at, I'm just going to take one snippet. You go back to the end of the first half, Tulane gets the ball back. North Texas has to punt. Tulane gets the ball back with 47 seconds to play. And what does Jon Sumrall have? 3 timeouts. When's the last time any Florida coach, and I just mean the last 4 years, with Napier, had all 3 timeouts in the final minute of the first half? It just doesn't happen. The guy all they did was burn timeouts because of clock management, because of personnel misuse, because of disorganization, because the quarterback's waiting to get the play in from the sideline, all of that. They just burn timeouts left and right as a program the last 4 years. Well, they get Tulane gets the ball back, 47 seconds left, all 3 timeouts, boom, 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 used all 3, and then go for it on 4th and goal at the 1-yard line. They could have kicked a field goal there, and probably the analytics say kick the field goal there, because you don't get the benefit of not getting, if you don't get the touchdown, you're not really getting the benefit of the other team starting deep in its territory, right? So analytics there say take the points, get off the field, go into the locker room with a little momentum. He says, screw that, 4th and 1, boom, touchdown, game over. At that point, it's 24-7 instead of 20-7. But everything you wanted to see from this guy, really, scared money don't make money. That was a scared money move, right? That was a, let's go. We got nothing to lose. We got a championship at stake. Let's go. and I loved everything about it. And it really only happened because the guy had all 3 of his timeouts.
Well, the good news is he didn't say scared money don't make money to the sideline reporter, because that one followed Billy for 4 years and out the door. But the other one was where he sprinted down the sideline after the forced fumble and the fumble return. I mean, he's step for step with the guy down the sideline. He was a step slow, but as you would expect at 43 for, a college football player versus a college football player. But the win sets up a rematch, and they got drilled at Ole Miss, man. 45-10. Our boy Gary Smith, who covers Tulane for the Baton Rouge Advocate, was at that game. And, Ole Miss might have played one of its best games. Tulane was good and had some nice wins. They beat Duke for one, right? ACC champion Duke, that we'll get to in a minute. But it's 1 and 2 rematches, which is something to criticize. But the committee, we don't need rematches, right? Alabama and Oklahoma, don't need that, right? The rematch, they could have jiggered this thing a little bit differently. Easy to second guess how they put together the 12-team bracket, the committee, right? But we're going to do it anyway. Miami, Alabama, and/or Notre Dame, right, Mark? With Ohio State remaining at number 2, right? After losing a close one to Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. But Bama stays at 9 after getting just waylaid by Georgia. I mean, Georgia looked terrific. I'd pick Georgia right now. If I had to pick a team, I'd pick them. Man, that defensive performance was just bruising. I mean, my Lord, that is a physical football team, man. They were ready for that because they had lost at home between the hedges to Alabama 24-21. So they didn't account for conference title game results there. But then BYU did fall a spot after getting, routed by Texas Tech for the second time. And that's, Cougars' 2 losses were that one team. And Texas Tech, with that defense, who knows? They could run the table, right? But that opened the door when they dropped a spot to put Miami next to Notre Dame and then allow the head-to-head to come into play and jump Notre Dame. I mean, it really was it was fairly illogical, but the system was set up that way because of the way they go about things like the show on Tuesdays and these things. I know you have many thoughts on this.
Well, ultimately, I believe they got it right? The results on the field, Notre Dame played Miami. They're both 2
But with Alabama?
Teams. Well, again, if
that's who I would have left out.
And that's fair, but they had made a point of saying that getting in the championship game should not be punitive. BYU. So I get it. BYU they dropped, and I don't understand why they dropped BYU, but that's to me the regard. They didn't drop Virginia very much for losing to Duke. They didn't drop Alabama. They didn't even move up Georgia. They just flip-flopped Ohio State and Indiana. So there wasn't a lot of movement regarding the championship teams. But yes, Notre Dame, the issue is they dropped Notre Dame consecutive weeks. They dropped Notre Dame 1 spot after beating Stanford in their season finale, and they dropped Notre Dame again while being idle. And that part doesn't make sense. To me, I think they got to the right ending, even though, if you want to compare Alabama to Notre Dame in what they've done recently, sure, Notre Dame looks like it's on a little bit of a roll, but Alabama has the best resume, has the most number of wins versus top 25 teams, has the best win on anybody's resume, winning at Georgia, right, in the middle of the season. So Alabama's resume absolutely trumped Notre Dame's resume. If you don't count that blowout loss in the SEC title game, which it looked like the committee. The issue is Notre Dame sat there for weeks thinking it was safe, that it was ahead of Miami, and they're not playing. Miami's not playing. How could Miami possibly jump us? We're not playing. They're not playing. You've kept us in front of them for 4 weeks, and then Notre Dame gets jumped. So the committee gets the result right head to head, but they should have done that weeks ago. They should have had Miami ahead of Notre Dame. As soon as Miami started playing better, as soon as, you thought Miami, they start getting closer, you got to make that move. And so they go about it the wrong way. They got to get rid of those Tuesday shows. That's kind of like the common belief now. But here's the problem. They're like contractually obligated to do those for like another 5 or 6 years. So those aren't probably going to go away. Now, maybe they can change it a little bit, whatever. This is obviously going to be some growing pains. But, the great Dan Wetzel, I love him, but he summed it up perfectly. This is not they got the right end result. How they got there certainly will be questioned, but it's way better than what we had 5 years ago or 15 years ago or 25 years ago. And there's no computer that's going to be able to figure this out. You've got to be able to look at these teams head to head, take into account injuries and things like that, and go from there. You got to take into account that, hey, Georgia had a lot on the line here. A first round bye. They're playing a revenge game because they lost. Their big loss was to Alabama at home. So you factor all that stuff in. They're playing in Atlanta, which is, it was a really, basically a home crowd for Georgia. It sounded like anyway. I don't know if it was 50-50 or not. But there's a lot to be considered there. And I would have done exactly what the committee done. I just would have done it weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell Mark stuff sometimes that he said, and he'll argue against it. Mark and I don't agree on things a lot. We just like to play devil's advocate. The Socratic method, as someone said to me one time. You sure like the Socratic method? I said, I've learned from the best, Mark Long. No, but dude, come on. Notre Dame looked better than Alabama for
against who? Against who?
Scored 70 points against Syracuse. I mean, I'm not saying Syracuse
doesn't have its quarterback, right?
Yeah, but it was 70 points. I will say this. Dan Wetzel, back to you, the great Dan Wetzel, for now at ESPN. I mean, he really is just terrific. His takes, the way he puts pieces together, he's fantastic. We both really revere him. He said today on their podcast yesterday, I guess they did it Sunday, him, Pete Thamel, no Reese Davis, mercifully, was Notre Dame fourth in the odds. Fourth best team, according to the odds. He felt they were one of the 5 teams. I don't remember who the 5th he mentioned was, but it's the first 3, Notre Dame. I don't know if you put Texas Tech in there.
Probably Texas Tech. Yeah.
I would put them in there. He even said Miami he might put in that bucket, can win it. In his opinion, he thought Notre Dame was one of them that could win it. He doesn't think Alabama can win it, and I don't. And I don't think you do. And I think Notre Dame, with its physicality, with its run game, defense, I think actually would be a tougher out than Alabama myself. And then at some point, don't you have to make these decisions? They're hard decisions, but anyway, Notre Dame.
Well, then you need to change your rules and get away from conference champions, because your problem here was you were stuck. The Duke winning the ACC messed things up, put a wrench in there. I'd be totally honest. We don't need Tulane and James Madison in the playoff.
We're going to get to that mess.
And they're both double-digit underdogs, and they can't win it. So, again, if you want to have a legitimate playoff that involves the best 12 teams in college football, or maybe you want to have the best 11 teams plus a group of 5, well, that needs to be the rule. And here's the thing. This beginning next year, Notre Dame's, it's locked in that Notre Dame, if it's in the top 12, it's got an automatic spot. So that starts next year. So this is really a one-off, right? Because next year,
probably,
assuming Notre Dame's in the top 12,
well, then Notre Dame's team next year is like a lot better than this year's team.
Well, yeah, and so they'll be locked in. And this won't be I don't think we're going to have this issue, but there's always going to be people complaining. I don't care if you're at 12, 16, or 24. There's always going to be one team that feels snubbed. This one had a pretty good argument for for why it should be in, I think.
Yeah, and it opened with such a tough schedule at Miami, losing by 3. Now, I don't think that game was reflective of the Miami kind of was the better team that night, clearly on the lines. And then A&M, they lose, it would drop an extra point snap and then a final play touchdown pass, losing by 3. Now, it was at home, and it was probably A&M's biggest win in a lot of ways.
Lost by 1, didn't they?
Oh, was it 1? What was it, 40?
Yeah, I think they lost. Their two losses are by a combined 4 points.
What was the score of that A&M game? Sorry, Phil, no box score.
Was it 41-40?
Oh, that was it. I had 44-41 in my mind for some reason. Anyway, but you're not going to snub a team from the Golden Dome very often. And when it's Notre Dame, it's going to create a firestorm. AD Bavacqua. Look, I've dealt with Pete in the past as PGA of America president. He spent like 5 or 6 years there, I think 12 to 18, never saying anything, right? I mean, this guy was as boring got, just a stuffed suit, just talking about growing the game, just a bunch of just talking points, never said a thing. And then he goes to NBC Sports for several years and made some big deals and did great work there. Look, the guy's clearly an accomplished dude and smart. But man, he is coming out guns blazing now. It's like, I don't know that he needed to be doing this with golf necessarily, but man, I mean, he is ripping the ACC a new one, pointing out how it ran the Notre Dame Miami replay like a dozen times, did some like graphic comparing resume, facts are facts. And he's just like, what is the deal here? Aren't we partners? Well, you are. You have 24 sports playing in that league, but you don't have football playing in the league, though, Pete. Not being in a conference really bit Notre Dame in the butt on this one. Now, I'm sure financially it's the best move for the school because of its NBC, contract. But he's speaking to reporters at noon today to whine some more. I'm interested to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, and he'll make a lot of threats. The reality is, until he goes to the SEC or the Big Ten and says, I'm ready. I don't think he has. Well, he's mad at the ACC. Why is he going to go to the ACC and want to do anything with the ACC? He feels
because they have the 24 sports in there already. I
get it, but move them. Like, you're the biggest entity in college sports. You have a lot of power here. You chose ESPN. I mean, you chose NBC. You snubbed ESPN. Well, guess what? The ACC's in bed with the ESPN, right? The ACC network is an ESPN property. Mm-hmm. So the people on ESPN, the talking heads, the people who do a lot of campaigning, who have a platform, were campaigning for Miami, right? Miami did some campaigning. Notre Dame didn't do anything. They took the high road. They were very quiet about, whether they should be in. They compared themselves to Alabama. They didn't want any comparison to Miami for obvious reasons. They thought their 10-game winning streak and the fact that they were Notre Dame, they thought that would be enough. Certainly when you factor that in with Alabama's loss in the SEC title game and where they were in the rankings ahead of Miami, they thought that was it. Clearly they were mistaken. They played this wrong, and they're playing catch up at this point, trying to convince everybody that they made a mistake when, beforehand they weren't really trying to sell anybody on why Notre Dame should be in.
So Notre Dame's out. James Madison's in. Kind of cool being a Virginian, having a cousin who went to James Madison. My little sister got her master's in nutrition at James Madison. My father used to have an office in Harrisonburg. It's a beautiful area of the country. So I have some affinity for it. I'd still rather see Notre Dame than James Madison personally, just for the playoff excitement. But they got in because of the 5th highest ranked conference champion after Duke upset Virginia in overtime. Okay. Once JMU loses at Oregon is 3 touchdown underdog, they'll officially have a new head coach in place and it's Billy Napier. You go from Bob Chesney, who's 21-5 in 2 seasons, 1 more win than Billy had in 4 seasons in Gainesville. And before that, Kirk Cignetti, who is like quickly becoming a legend. People are trying to figure out turnarounds at a school in a major sport. Kevin Brockway picked a good one. Jim Calhoun at UConn, or elevating. That's a pretty good one. Someone said John Calipari at UMass. I mean, the fact that he cheated his way to like the Final Four back when there was cheating. I don't know about that one. But you're going from Cignetti to Chesney to Billy Napier. A lot of people are scratching their heads and going, look, Billy is impressive, I'm sure, when he's doing his PowerPoint and selling his vision. He certainly sold it to Scott Strickland, who took it hook, line, and sinker, and is lucky to still be around because of that. But the fact of the matter is that's a pretty interesting hire, to say the least.
I think the poor JMU fans are going to be like, what did we do? I watched Chesney. I've watched him a little bit this
going
season.
To be?
Yeah, well, are right now. I don't know how much did they. I don't know how much they've even seen of Billy. Has he been introduced? Have they had an introductory press conference yet?
Well, they looked at his record on Wikipedia, I'm guessing.
Well, Chesney's polished, right? Good-looking dude. Says the right things. He's doesn't have to read from a script. I mean, this guy answers questions on the fly. Very, very camera ready. Good coach. Seems to be doing everything the right way. I feel like JMU is going to be sitting here in 2 years going, what did we do? What did we hire? Again, and maybe Billy's going to get back to his level and be comfortable. He's going to hire an offensive coordinator, it sounds like. He'll be better without that on his plate. All those things I feel like could benefit Billy, but clearly the guy was in over his head. He was in over his head on the football field. He was in over his head at the podium. The guy was just in over his head everywhere except maybe potentially building a roster, or at least the outline of a roster. I mean, no doubt, the guy missed in the portal at times, missed on the recruiting trail, missed in the development of his players. Maybe they're better people, but there's not a lot of guys you can sit here and tell me they're much better players from the day Billy Napier got them and the day they left Billy Napier. That's going to be a very small list of guys who showed significant improvement under his tutelage.
Yeah, I need to say a quick apology to my mother because she loves Billy. So sorry, Mom. But he wasn't good here. And salt of the earth guy, respectful guy. I've mentioned his wife on here, friend, gym buddies, great gal. I hope they enjoy Harrisonburg and succeed there. I'm not pulling against Billy. I just know what I saw here, and it was a disorganized football program and a guy who didn't know how to message. And also a guy who thought he could do it all. So he's hired an offensive coordinator there, hadn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So at least he was told, you're hiring an offensive coordinator here, dude. Right. And Scott Strickland, I think, told him that too. But also, in fairness to Scott, allows his people to make their choices. And he said he will be evaluated on this choice. And he did evaluate him and did what needed to be done on October 19th. And I think, and you think, I believe too, they landed a pretty damn good coach. We'll get to it in a minute, but man, people are just keep relitigating this thing to the death, man. But let's get to, Lane Kiffin. Why didn't they get Lane Kiffin? I mean, I'm tired of talking about it, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But first off, I want to touch on one last point on the college football playoff. I wasn't necessarily pushing for 16 teams last year, right? When 3 lost Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Miami didn't get in with Cam Ward. That would have been pretty tasty playoff right there. Throw those 3 in, South Carolina playing at a very high level. Cam Ward, that guy's going to be a nightmare matchup for anyone. And Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin scoring points, they could have won a game easily. Now you're leaving out Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt, surging Texas. You talk about a brand. I mean, they're right there with Notre Dame. Notre Dame on a 10-game winning streak. I don't know. I think the college football playoff's worse for not having those teams, and probably going to 16 teams is going to happen. But they already have 2 years where you kind of wished it had happened in some ways, right, Mark?
Yeah, no doubt. You start, if you're going to include the little guys, if you want to include group of 5 and you still want to have the big brands in there, you need more spaces. That's just the bottom line, because there's going to be a team that gets hot like Notre Dame. This is not the first time some team's going to be super hot at the end. And if you're stacking resume and you don't have a real a point of data that says, what have you done recently, right? They used to have that in the NCAA tournament back in the day, last 10, right?
Yeah.
What was your record in the last 10 games? And they've gotten away from that. It's really, they want to look at your resume without your name attached, side by side, strength of schedule, quality wins, bad losses, strength of schedule, strength of resume, all those things side by side without your name on it, and then go from there. And that's kind of what the NCAA tournament has done as well, with the net rankings and the quad 1, quad 2 wins, those things. And they want it to be much more analytically derived than eye test, right? But the reality is, if you widen the field a little bit more, give more access points, you're going to be able to get teams in that pass the eye test, but might not pass necessarily the resume test. And I think that's what you want to get to. And then a team like Alabama last year does get in. Team like Miami last year does get in. Team like Notre Dame this year does get in. Maybe even a team like Duke that won a Power 4 conference with a pathetic record, but maybe they belong in because conference champion is a conference champion.
Were you in there yesterday when I was talking about last 10 basketball?
No.
It's funny. Great minds think alike. I was talking to Denver Parlor, the SID. I'm like, when did they get rid of the last 10? Because that was significant, I thought. If you were 4-6 and in your last 10, and another team was 7-3, and you were the last 4 into the 68 team field, I guess, but 64 team field, I always like to say, you would get in at 7 because you were 7-3, even if you had maybe had one more loss. I think there's something to be said for how you're playing at the end, man. I mean, if we're going to do it like this, and it's not as restrictive as it used to be, you go back through history and you see teams with Penn State was like unbeaten multiple times that it didn't even get a play for a national title back in the day. And the list goes on. So, I mean, Auburn, 2004, they wanted to play. You think they weren't going to do better than Oklahoma losing 55-19 to USC? I think that Auburn team would have played better. Utah was 12-0 that year, right, with Urban Meyer. I would have loved to have seen that offense going against somebody. They would have won. They could have upset anyone. So Ross Dellinger put together a bracket. We're not going to do them all, but here's some of the matchups we were missing out on. Texas Tech, Texas, right? Texas and Miami, good one. Georgia, Vandy, Diego against Kirby. I mean, that'd be fun. And then Ole Miss, Notre Dame. So those are some of the matchups we could have had, but won't anyway. So we'll be discussing plenty of college football playoff stuff going ahead. Do you have any stray thought before we move?
Well, my only stray thought is I don't want the rematches. Like why don't you have, you should have it in your bylaws that you can move teams. They'd have this in the NCAA tournament, that you can trying to avoid rematches in the first and second rounds. You move people out of a region to another region. You move them up or down a line a seeding to get them out of a potential rematch against a conference opponent or somebody you played in non-con. You just try to avoid that. And I wish football would have done a better job, because if Miami gets in, or if Notre Dame gets in over Miami, we would have had 3 rematches in the opening round. You would have had Notre Dame playing Texas A&M. You would have had Oklahoma, Alabama. You would have had Tulane, LSU. And I just think there's a better way of doing that. You could have swapped Ole Miss and A&M. You could have swapped Ole Miss and who's the other one? You could have swapped Ole Miss, A&M, and Ole Miss, A&M, and whoever the third team is in there, Oklahoma. You could have had all 3 of them. You could have moved them around to avoid rematches. And none of them played in the final week of the season. So I don't think, and they all still would have hosted. They just would have hosted different teams.
Yeah, I totally agree with the lack of the rematch is unappealing, to say the least. The only game on Friday the 19th is Bama at Oklahoma. I'm not excited. Sorry. Are you?
Yeah, I think yes, because it's 2 big brands. It's the Friday night game. I mean, we don't get a lot of Friday football.
I hope Oklahoma just waylays them. I mean,
you were really down on Alabama and have been for a while.
They've looked terrible.
They haven't looked terrible. They've struggled. They can't run the ball. Listen, they haven't been able to run the ball all year.
It's a big element of football.
Yeah, but they also have 2 fantastic receivers, Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. They're down their tight end, Josh, as they say it, Cuevas. They're down. I mean, they have played well despite not having a very good running game. The fact that they've won games, they've got CJ Allen's your kind of defender. Not CJ Allen. CJ Allen plays for Georgia, but they have some guys on that.
Yeah, Gray Hubbard, the safety.
Yes, they've got some guys who can bring it. Lawson, Deontay Lawson can absolutely bring it. When he's healthy, he's missed some time. Jam Miller's their best running back. He's missed the majority of the season. He's hurt again. They expect to have him back. But, Alabama's not great, and I agree with you. They're completely flawed, and they can't win it all. But to say that I don't think that I want to watch Alabama, I'll take Alabama over James Madison.
Well, I agree with that. I just don't agree with Alabama. All right, so I'll tell you one thing, Mark. Probably most listeners are well aware that college football coaches are at this level aren't like most of us. They're just wired differently, man. I mean, Jon Sumrall. I mean, this work ethic is like unsustainable for the average person, right? This guy has 2 jobs. He oversaw 2 early signing periods last Wednesday. Now, he had a lot of help here at Florida, but he had to do his part. I mean, he was FaceTiming 10, 11 guys, they got hired. I mean, he's involved and, played a role in signing the number 16 class, which is pretty damn impressive when you're not even here. And then you're signing a class at Tulane with 14 guys in it too. Like he made a point of like trying to retain that class, not pilfer it like James Franklin did. Brought all of his class from Penn State to Virginia Tech. But they ended up with 16 guys, I believe it was, or 18 guys. We'll go through a few of the big ones. The biggie is Davian Gross, Frisco, Texas. He's the latest Percy Harvin light candidate. 6'2", 190, 24.1 yards a catch. Last 12 touchdowns on 37 catches only. 56 total touchdowns in 3 seasons, 3 on returns, 26 rushing, 27 receiving. He's a top 50 recruit. I'm excited to see what he can do. They are definitely going to have some playmakers in the perimeter with him, Wilson, Dallas, and then maybe Trey Wilson if he can ever get healthy. And then you got Vernell Brown the third, and I'm probably forgetting some. I mean, TJ Abrams really flashed down the stretch. CJ Branham, Windermere High School, 8 interceptions, 4 pick sixes his last 2 years. This guy's a speed demon. 10.34 seconds. He ran that 9 times in his track career. I mean, he can burn. KJ Ford, edge guy from Duncanville, Texas, beat Texas A&M, late push for him. You got Will Griffin, the quarterback from Jesuit High in Tampa. Mark, this guy started since he was an 8th grader, 12,000 plus yards, 143 touchdowns, both second in the state. Those are just a few of them. Then they land a few DBs on Friday, Thursday and Friday. One CJ Huster from Cocoa High, 3 state championships at Cocoa. He had 2 interceptions in the quarters and the semis, I think, both. So he's pretty dynamic. And they also flipped to safety, Dylan Purter from LSU. So there's some solid pieces, and you got some pieces you need at DB. They got Caden Hall also at safety. Another guy was coveted. So they got some safeties, got a corner, got some playmaking speed, got a quarterback. I know you don't keep up with 5 offensive linemen too. You don't really track recruiting when you're covering 5 teams like Mark is. It's a little hard to do. But I don't know if you have a quick thought or two just on who Jon Sumrall is bringing in his first class.
Well, I just think the number 16, again, rankings are what they are. They're very subjective, but having a 16th ranked class first, for having gotten the job days before signing day, it's impressive. That keeping the class together is impressive. The Gators didn't have a lot of guys flip. I lost 2, right? A running back and a tight end. But it's a lot of 3 stars. It's not super deep, and it's certainly not super high end, but there's absolutely some pieces, and we'll see how they develop moving forward. I think it's crazy that you can now sign 35, 40 guys. I saw some teams sign like 35 players on signing day. I guess if you've got the money for it from an NIL standpoint, because you're not signing, there's no longer a cap on recruiting. It used to be 27, right? Now you can sign as many as you want as long as you can pay for them out of, from an NIL and rev share standpoint.
Well, given all the movement, I guess that's why they did it. I mean, some of these teams are just rebuilding annually. I think Jon Sumrall had 60 new players on a roster at Tulane. So he's familiar with putting together a roster quickly and succeeding. Look, I don't want to spend too much more time on this coaching search, okay? Everyone else still apparently does. I mean, we have one of our friends, the guy's completely unhinged on some levels. I mean, you get text at midnight about like hand-wringing about Todd Golden's non-con schedule being too tough. It's just like, look, I don't need my phone pinging at midnight. I have 2 elderly parents. Sometimes I worry. Sometimes, oh God, something may happen. No, I get up and this guy's like, pearl clutching about something that's like irrelevant to like anything that matters in life. This is Gator sports, man. Okay. This is what we do for a living. So we have to, hand wring, but 70-year-old people sitting around doing this at midnight, like, is worrisome for me. But we got Danny Werfel, just on a media tour. I didn't talk to Danny a whole lot. I've never found Danny to be like the most, revelatory interview, right? Nice as hell guy. I mean, he's salt of the earth dude. I mean, he does, charitable work for a living in New Orleans, in the ward. So, I mean, great man, not a great speaker. I haven't really listened to much of what he's selling, but you got Scott Strickland sitting down with Andy Staples, former colleague and, on 3 and real big national voice, does a podcast. I mean, he just did this like a day ago, 2 days ago. I mean, look, Lane Kiffin isn't coming, okay? Can people just accept the fact that Lane Kiffin chose LSU? All right. And Jon Sumrall has won over a ton of people. People were like, what? I mean, they were ripping this hire. Now there's a lot of Jon Sumrall love going around, deservedly so. I mean, why are we beating this point to death 10 days after it happened? I just am done with it.
Yeah, the only thing I can assume is that, Scott and some others are trying to make it clear that if anybody has any doubts, they did all they could, everything within their power to get Lane Kiffin to Gainesville, to drive the Lane train into the swamp and make it happen. And they want to prove that as much as they can, sell that, so that any stragglers who aren't on board with the Jon Sumrall pick can get on board with it. I assume that's what this is. That is dotting your I's, crossing your T's, trying to get everybody on the same page that, hey, this was not a AD malpractice. I wanted this guy. We tried to get this guy. We did everything in our power to get this guy. This guy chose to be somewhere else. And I do think there's something to be said. I don't know if Scott's saying this outright, but I do believe there's a belief behind the scenes that Florida is better off without Lane Kiffin, without the drama, without having a guy who, by the way, all the talk is he really wanted the Alabama job, and he does want the Alabama job at some point, some way, somehow. And Alabama's 19-7 under Kalen DeBoer. 4 losses last year, 3 losses this year. If they lose in the CFP, or as you point out, when they lose in the CFP, they'll have back-to-back 4-loss seasons. That's not good enough at Alabama, right? That's not sustainable at Alabama. It's sustainable at a lot of places. It's probably sustainable in Gainesville right now, not sustainable at Alabama. So is Lane Kiffin going to be a short-term guy in LSU who's looking to jump to Tuscaloosa when and if they move on from Kalen DeBoer, or Kalen DeBoer moves on from Alabama? So I do think there's a belief behind the scenes, in the shadows, that we are better off, the Gators are better off without Lane Kiffin.
Nick Saban lost 8 games in his last 5 seasons at Alabama, and that was actually a step down a little bit from his pace prior to that. So he's about to lose 8 in 2 seasons. So, yeah, they're accustomed to that, even though
and some head-scratching ones. Vanderbilt last year and Florida State this year.
Oh, my Lord, the Florida State one. Again, why is Bama in the playoff field, please?
They won at Georgia.
I'll tell you, Monday, Jon Sumrall got a huge endorsement. He's been getting fans again are warming up to him. The media we already like what we've seen. We want to see more, and we're going to give some more familiarity with him soon, hopefully, once Tulane wraps up its season and he's here full time. But Todd Golden, man, gushing about Jon Sumrall Monday. And it's interesting. He arrives to Gainesville, Jon Sumrall, and his first stop is the basketball offices to check in with Todd Golden. It's like, meet the, reigning young up and coming national champion basketball coach. And Todd had already spoken to him on the phone. He said, from the moment I spoke to him on the phone, I was like, this guy seems like our kind of guy, a very similar mentality to what I did when I had the opportunity. Man, getting a chance to coach at Florida and do some great things here. He has a great understanding of what this place wants now in their football program. Obviously winning, but just in terms of being explosive offensively. And then he praised him for managing 2 jobs and all these things. But he really likes him. That's a nice endorsement. I mean, Todd didn't have to gush about this, so he truly believes it. I don't think Todd says much they didn't believe in front of the mic. I mean, he's pretty straightforward, forthright.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I have discussed this privately about, there's much to do about the Lane Kiffin's family's visit to Gainesville, and Danny Werfel was on that tour. And Danny was probably eye candy, right? Heisman Trophy winner. But Danny doesn't live in Gainesville. He's not really a good guy to give a tour. Well, Jon Sumrall got the Goldens, right? It was a little bit different deal. The wives got on the phone and, hey, here's the schools. Here's what you need to know about your kids. All these things, they're set up a little bit closer in age. They got young kids. Lane Kiffin's kids are all pretty much grown, right? So from that standpoint, I think it was just a little bit better fit. And we both love the Goldens, obviously. And I do think that played a factor in getting the Goldens hooked up with the Sumralls. And, who better they're going to be living in the same area, right? They're going to be going to the same schools, Oak Hall. They're going to be playing same sports. My kids do the same thing. So there's something to be said for that being your tour guide, somebody who's living here with young children of very similar age, who've been there, done that for 4 years now and know how to sell Gainesville.
And Todd is just beyond dynamic. Again, Danny Werfel, nice guy. We talked to him after the thing. Few are as dynamic as Todd Golden. I remember when I went to San Fran last year and they were having that dinner at Original Joe's, right? His old stomping grounds. And John Dugan, the Duggan, I think, the owner I talked to, and he said, man, I fell in love with the guy immediately. He was like the best interview in sports. It's like, I'm watching this 34-year-old guy in front of a mic and going, man, this guy is dynamic. And they became fast friends. So, yeah, that was probably a missed opportunity if you really wanted the Lane train steering its way to Gainesville, putting him with Todd Golden or putting his ex-wife Layla and his brother Chris with Todd Golden and Megan might have been a better sales pitch. Speaking of Todd Golden, he and the Gators will lead off Foley's Corner, our weekly nod to the former athletic director, whose focus on all-around excellence is still being felt. Basketball, man, stumbling out of the gates a little bit, 5-3. Well, they are. TCU, 10-point lead, they blew. Arizona, they clearly weren't ready for Mo Pete. Is it Mo Pete? Koa Pete. I call him Mo the first time. Yeah, and look, they're number one in the nation now, right? And they lose at Duke by a point. I thought that was a positive performance. Obviously, we all did. Down, 14 at one point, lose by 1 on a turnover at the end by Boogie Flan, who undercut slightly a bit. A excellent performance in the second half. He was really good. He scored the last 4 field goals, hit some mid-range jumpers. I thought that were really, showed something, hit a 3, nice drive. So they play at UConn tonight in the Jimmy V Classic. Dan Hurley is going to be out for blood and revenge in this one after Florida ended their winning streak and their bid for a 3rd straight national championship last year when Walter Clayton had those big shots down the stretch in Raleigh. Boogie Flan, great story here. Why don't you share it? You were with Boogie, had to bolt before Boogie got there, but he's heading back to his old stomping grounds.
Yeah, Bronx kid, New York City kid, Bronx basketball, New York City basketball, the gritty kid. It's a stereotype, but it usually, is an accurate one. They have an edge. They play with some grit, and that's Boogie Flan, right? He can D you up, and if he starts hitting shots, look out. But the reality is he hasn't been kind of what Florida thought he was going to be, but he's going home, get on a big stage, Madison Square Garden. He bought 100 tickets at face value. So I kind of wrote about it being a pretty expensive homecoming for him. He expects to have 200 people there. He bought 100. And then friends and family bought another 100. He's going to have 200 people there. He played there last year with Arkansas, scored 20, had 20.7 rebounds in a win against Michigan. So, he's looking to go 2-0 at MSG. He's played there in high school. A couple times met LeBron there.
Okay.
He did not grow up a Knicks fan. He grew up a LeBron fan. So every time he went to the Garden, it was to see LeBron, not to see the Knicks. But he's 35 minutes away, his hometown, his house, his home, is 35-minute drive with some back roads and whatnot. So, we'll see. He has not been great, but he did show flashes. He's shooting 39% from the field, 25% from three-point range, and has, I think, 17 assists, 14 turnovers. Not nearly good enough. Got a bunch of steals. I think he's got 20-something steals. So he's been good defensively. Not as good offensively, but, who knows? Maybe this will be his breakout game.
Well, the second half against Dookie was pretty terrific down the stretch, scoring. But
Kept him in that game. Got him in that game.
No assist in that game. 4 turnovers. So a lot of work ahead for Boogie. 19 years old. Plenty of season ahead. This is an important game, I think, in terms of, at least being, highly competitive. Gators could really use a win. I mean, they don't want to be 5-4. This non-conference schedule, I mean, I get the hand wringing from our lunatic fan friend about it because it's onerous, to say the least. You didn't expect the TCU loss in there where they kind of blew that game with turnovers, which is a point Mark made to Todd yesterday. If you guys can just cut down on turnovers a little bit, and Todd interjected and cut down on fouling, but too many bad fouls. But this backcourt for UConn, man, is tough, right? I mean, it's Solo Ball and Silas Demery. I mean, these guys combined 25. Demery's got 5.6 assists. Ball is just a good player. It's a good 3-point shooter, though he hadn't been shooting that well from there. Anyway, it's going to be a good matchup. I'm looking forward to it, much more than Oklahoma Alabama rematch, personally.
Yeah. The point is that they're so good in the front court, and they're the best offensive rebounding team in the country, that if they don't turn the ball over and just get up shots, their rebounding margin, their rebounding percentage is so good that they're going to get their fair share of misses and get second chance points and all these. They just cannot turn the ball over. Turning the ball over for this team is defeating yourself. Not only is it a lost possession, but now that's where a lot of their fouls are coming because they're turning the ball over and they're in transition defense and they're having to foul to prevent a layup. So it's just a big mess. But that is the number one thing, that if they can keep their turnovers, minimally under 12, maybe single digits, they will have a chance in every single game because they're so good up front.
Speaking of keeping under, Swamp Things is blown up again. We're solidly over an hour. But let's just wrap up a few more Foley's Corners things. Liv McGill, the sophomore point guard for the women's team, continues just to play at an incredibly high level. 32 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 7 steals in a win over South Alabama. This young woman needs to cut back on her turnovers, though. They lost by 4 to Virginia Tech. She had 10 turnovers in that game and fouled out, but 30 points. And she's playing a ton of minutes, 40, 39. She's now scored over 25 in all but 2 games out of 9. She's had 38, 30, and 32. I mean, she is dynamic. I remember seeing her last year for the first time or two and was like, man, this young woman's going to be good. The turnovers are an issue to some degree, but man, without her, this team wouldn't have much. I'm curious to see how it all translates to the SEC. They play West Georgia Sunday here. I might slip over there and watch her in action and see how many points she can put up in that game. Volleyball out. Lost to number 2 SMU. Not the greatest debut for the new head coach, replacing Mary Wise. But I don't know what he had to work with after losing Kennedy Martin to Penn State in the transfer portal. That was a big blow.
Yeah, but he lost whatever their final record was, 16-12. Mary Wise never had 12 losses in her career in whatever the 30-year span that she was here. So that's a little bit of an eye-opener, right, in year one. But it's year one. It's a transition year. You get it. This will be big. He can't lose double digits again. If you're going to get the program back on track, back to the top of the SEC, it starts in year 2. Texas, Oklahoma are good, specifically Texas. You got to be able to go compete with them. Again, I go back to this. SMU volleyball. Where's SMU volleyball? It's come out of nowhere, right? SMU oil money. They got a lot. They got an NIL program. We've talked about Texas Tech, what they're doing with football. We saw what they did with softball with Kennedy, stealing her, paying her $1 million. LSU's kind of doing the same with all of its sports. BYU, come out of nowhere and all of a sudden is a contender in basketball and football. These programs that have billionaire boosters, not millionaires, billionaire boosters, they might have an advantage in the NIL era. We're going to see, but it looks like still early, but it looks like, if you've got that kind of billionaire backing who's going to fund every sport, you're going to have a chance.
And last one, Nick Zimmerman is the new head coach of women's soccer. 4th since 2017 when Becky Burley retired, or one fewer than FSU's national titles.
Ooh,
since 2014, which has to hurt Gator fans. Sorry to stick it to you like that, but 4 coaches versus 5 national titles. So that's not a good trend to be on. 36-year-old guy. We'll be interested to see what he can do because the soccer program has been flailing for a decade now.
Yeah, I like the hire. He hired an assistant head coach, Jonathan Garber, I believe. So, we'll see. I mean, the big thing is they've got talent. They got talent on the way. Can he keep it, and can he make the most of it?
Yeah, the recruiting class they were putting together was top 5. And, look, that this program, man, is just score some goals, man. I mean, even if you lose a couple of games that way, I mean, there was a lot of freaking goose eggs in the last several years. So hopefully this podcast wasn't a goose egg. It went too long again. Thanks for those who stuck with us. We tried to give you a complete rundown. A lot going on always, even when you think it's not. Thanks for the conversation, Mark.
Thanks for having me as always.
Also want to thank our faithful producer, Wesley Alden, for continued efforts. The 3 of us appreciate everyone who took time from their busy lives to join us. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Swamp Things, your Florida Gators podcast. For more coverage, visit OrlandoSentinel.com and APnews.com. On Twitter, follow Edgar at OS Gators and Mark at AP Mark Long. Please subscribe to this podcast, share it on social media, and review it on iTunes. See you next time.